Hello, and welcome to this ICAEW webinar in association with GDPR 365. This is part of our GDPR webinar series, which aims to give you practical advice on how to prepare for GDPR. My name is Mark Taylor, and I'm a technical manager here at ICAEW, and I'll be your host for today's session. Just before I introduce today's speaker, I'd like to say a little bit about today's topic. I think we all recognize the importance of GDPR. It's all around generating trust with your clients, demonstrating that you're keeping their data secure and using it in an appropriate way. One of the really key themes that runs through everything to do with GDPR, and it's a message we're hearing from the Information Commissioner's Office, is that people who use personal data need to be accountable for how they use, how they store, and how they process that data. And one of the starting points for your GDPR journey has got to be around knowing where your data is, how you secure it, and how you process it, and so on. And tools like we will see today really help you focus on those questions and answer them. But not only that, they help you document that. In the event of an issue, then later on, you'll be able to use this documentation as a way of demonstrating that you were using the data in an accountable manner. Today's speaker is Ty Chatelet from GDPR 365. Ty is a seasoned internet entrepreneur from South Africa and has been involved in software development since 1995. He has assembled a team of developers, legal and compliance experts to help build GDPR compliance management service. We very much encourage you to get involved with today's webinar. You can submit your questions to us at any time by typing in a question into the question box and pressing send. The questions will come straight through to us without being sent to the rest of the audience. And we've allowed time at the end of the webinar for a Q&A session, so please do send through any questions you have during the webinar. You can also use the question box to let us know of any technical issues you have with regard to today's webinar, and we'll do our best to answer those straight away for you. Please also take note of the webinar, the widgets on your console, in which you'll find widgets relating to the resources available, and later you'll be able to download a copy of the slides as well. So before I hand over to Ty to take you through the remainder of the webinar today, I think it's worthwhile just asking everybody a question. How far down the road towards GDPR compliance is your organization? And the answers could be just started, halfway there, or completed. And it'd be interesting to get your feedback on this. It really does help us understand the preparations that organizations are undertaking and just how far they are compliant. Give it quite a few seconds for people to answer. I can see the answers coming through now. So the question is, how far down the road towards GDPR compliance is your organization? Just started, halfway there, or completed? Interested to see if anyone actually answers completed. Not exactly a trick question, but it'd be interesting to see how many organizations are really quite significantly down that road. I think one point to keep in mind, of course, about GDPR compliance, it is an onward journey. As it was with the Data Protection Act for the last 20 years, organizations are expected to continuously evaluate their data protection standards and respond appropriately as business needs or operational needs may change in the future. Thank you very much for your answers. I'll just flick over to the slide now showing you the answers. As you can see, we've actually got one person who has completed. Fantastic. Very much interested in that. Quite a few people have just started, and a number of you are halfway there as well. I think starting is absolutely key, but it is an ongoing process, and something will evolve over time. So I'll now hand over to Ty, who will take you through the remainder of the presentation, and at the end we'll come back to me for taking your questions and providing some answers. Thank you.
Hello everybody, thank you for attending, and thank you to Mark and the team at the ICAEW for facilitating this event. What I'm going to be going through is some pertinent info about the GDPR, which puts into context our product and our service, and then I will give a demo of our compliance management service. But first, I'd like to just state that our service is software as a service. It's not law as a service. So we do not give legal advice, and that should be obtained from a properly qualified privacy lawyer or a privacy practitioner. So our service is cloud-based GDPR compliance management service that you can use for your business, and if you are in practice, you can also use it to facilitate the compliance of your clients if you wish to do so, and we'll be discussing that throughout the seminar as well. So in order to understand GDPR, some of you may have gone far down the road, some of you may have just started. I just need to introduce a couple of terms which I use a lot in the presentation, which will then create an understanding, and then we can talk about data governance and GDPR and the GDPR 365 service. So very quickly, what is the GDPR? It's a single set of rules valid across the European Union. It's a directive, so it's a regulation, no longer a directive, so it's enforceable by sanctions and fines, and really it defines individuals' rights, which is obviously a very important thing. We all want our personal rights protected in the data that flows throughout the world. We need to know that our data belongs to us and is protected. The ICO would obviously release certain amendments which are specific to the UK, and then also within, for example, the health sector, there are sector-specific legislation which is released as well. So the basic concepts of personal data is really any information relating to an identified natural person. We have personal data and we have sensitive personal data. Sensitive personal data includes things like your health, your genetic makeup, biometric information, political, religious, sexual orientation. That's all data of yours which you may hand over to organizations and entities to use in your dealings with them, but it actually belongs to you and they need to manage that information correctly. A controller is a natural or legal person, an organization, which determines the purposes and means of processing. So if you're in practice and you deal with your clients, you are a controller. If you run a business and you manage your customers and your employees, you are a controller of information. A processor is, for example, a company such as a payroll bureau that manages the outsourced payroll running for a business. So one would entrust them with information of your employees, and they have to be GDPR compliant and have to manage that information in a way that subscribes to all of your methodologies. And in fact, in the GDPR, the controller and the processor are jointly and severally liable for the proper protection of the information. So that's a very key issue. If you employ a processor and they get breached and information gets stolen, you are also potentially jointly liable for that. So there are quite a few risks to an organization in terms of not complying. There's no oversight of compliance activity. There's no accountability. If you aren't managing data security correctly, it's very easy for information to be breached and hacked both externally and internally, so by external elements or employees. If you have no records of compliance efforts, no notices about how you do things, you will be at some point reported. You will have a risk of fines, and you will definitely have reputational damage. GDPR is really all about data governance, and really we all want our data managed properly. Our clients, employees, all want that as well. So data must be processed with integrity and confidentiality. You need to keep it accurate and up to date. For example, if you're a credit bureau, you can't have out-of-date information about people's credit status and then they are compromised in terms of that information. It also needs to be minimized. You only should hold what is adequate and relevant for the purposes of what you are doing. A lot of companies accumulate data which they have no clear legitimate purpose to have, and they shouldn't have that. So it also needs to be used legally, and it also needs to be used for processes that you have agreed and disseminated in your privacy notice, which you can't suddenly use information for something which is completely unrelated to the purpose for which you disclosed that you are using it for. And also, if you keep data, you should keep it in a form, for example, if you archive data or backup data, it should be encrypted and not be able to be identified. So you may keep data for longer than is required for the processing purpose because you need it, for example, for tax reasons. You must try and de-identify that using encryption and various other techniques. So really, data governance is beyond just compliance. Yes, we all have to comply by the 25th of May 2018, but it's really about reducing your financial and reputational risks, making subject access processes more efficient, mitigating against security incidents by having the correct procedures in place to enable you to actually ward off attacks, ward off employee theft of information, and obviously that all results in improving your customer-client experience, making people want to trade with you because they know that their information is protected, so it enhances competitiveness. So really, for me, data governance is a new philosophy. Your data and the data the companies use is a precious resource. It must be nurtured and taken care of by you as a custodian of that information for other people. So, as I've clarified, that data belongs to the data subjects, not the holder of the information. And it must be disposed of when the legitimate purpose has run its course. It's important to note that everybody is panicking at this point about the date of the 25th of May 2018, but in reality, this legislation will be with us and will probably be enhanced and enforced more and more for the next 20 to 30 years. So it's not a once-off event. We have to manage the compliance of our organizations on an ongoing basis. And there are a number of reasons why it's important to have a system to do this. Just like you no longer do your accounting for your business on scraps of paper or Excel spreadsheets and you use a system to do it, you need to use a system to manage GDPR compliance. It's pointless having it sitting in a desk in one person's office, all the information about how you're managing your compliance. You need to be able to have a collaborative environment where you can actually all manage the various aspects of compliance throughout an organization. So organizations are dynamic. Things change. You need to review compliance. You get new computer systems, new computers, new people. So there's a constant need to review the compliance in the four main areas of compliance that I'll go into when I do the demo. You have new initiatives. You might be opening new branches or changing your systems entirely. You need to be able to manage data protection impact assessments. So those need to be potentially approved by the ICO. New technology is coming out all the time. New things are coming out, biometric devices, eye scanning devices. What is the impact of that on privacy? What is the impact on that on my policies in terms of managing the information of data subjects that work for me? Also, one of the key tenets of the GDPR is that new employees or all employees need to be aware of GDPR and need to manage the processes in the organization to comply with GDPR. So new employees need training and awareness, and ongoing employees need to have that awareness maintained. People forget things. People forget how to do things and need to be reminded, and this is a key area for any business going forward. So there's also security-wise, there are something like a few 100,000 viruses that get released into the world every single day. You need to have proper security in place to manage that on your servers and your systems and your computers and your devices. So security is something that needs to be reviewed on an ongoing basis. As a business, you may start dealing regionally or internationally. There are all the issues that are involved in that. And a lot of organizations change the way they do business. You may outsource a department and use a third party to do certain processes. You need to be able to manage those contracts. You need to be able to make sure that those entities are compliant with GDPR, even if they are located outside of the European Union. And that's a key aspect. In fact, any company that deals with the data of European Union data subjects, whether they be in the European Union or not, must be compliant with GDPR, and there's a whole lot of things about that. And some of you may have clients that are outside of the European Union, and you need to bear that in mind. So there's a constant requirement to review compliance on an ongoing basis, and you need to have a collaborative environment where data compliance and governance can be managed on an ongoing basis. So how do I prepare my organization? How do I help my clients understand data governance and compliance with the GDPR? And I think this is a question that all of you are asking of yourselves, and I think that is a key to being able to go forward confidently and be able to get yourselves compliant, and large percentage of you are not there yet. And also, more importantly, to a certain extent, to assist where you, if you are in practice, to get your clients compliant. And so how do you attain and manage that? Well, we're saying you need a data governance and compliance hub, and that is what GDPR 365 provides. So one of the key issues of the GDPR stated is that you must be able to demonstrate your compliance. So there are certain things you have to have done, and there are certain things that you have to record to enable you to show, if the ICO ever comes knocking at your door, that you are compliant. So we have a collaborative platform where you can assign accountability. Got powerful features. It's been reviewed by a lot of data protection experts who are reselling it on our behalf, and we are offering it for individual clients or for partners offering services. So really, if you look at an action plan for readiness with regards to GDPR, it goes like this. All your staff must understand GDPR and how it affects the work that they do and the information that they process. You need to make a decision on appointing a data protection officer and whether you need to have a data protection officer. There are a number of steps to determine that. You need to map your data and processes and understand the information that you use. You need to have privacy notices and policies in place that inform data subjects about what you are doing with their information. A key area, and an area where I believe that the ICO will determine who to audit, is subject access requests. So anybody about whom you hold information is allowed to do a subject access request, and you have to process those within a certain time limit, and you have to be able to show to the ICO and the supervisory authority that you have in fact complied with this and responded to these access requests properly. So you need to have those procedures in place. Staff training is an ongoing process. You need to have clearly defined breach management processes and the ability to manage a breach from discovery right through to completion. And then there are four main items of compliance, which is consent management, direct marketing, human resources, information technology, and then your processor and data sharing agreements. So this is an interface of our service, which I'll just go through very quickly, and then I will do a demo of the actual service itself. So if we look here, this is a dashboard for compliance on our service, and really, if we look at the main areas are compliance, where you need to manage consent management, direct marketing, human resources, information technology, and security. Data mapping, where you need to map who you are holding information about, why you're holding that information, what information you're holding, and where it is located. Governance, which is really your privacy notices, defining your policies, and storing and managing policy documents. The employee section, where you have employee guidelines, you have your training and awareness programs, and you have a record of training activities. Subject access, which is really the format of the submission, notification of submissions, and the process and recording of submissions. And finally, breach management, where we offer guidelines, the ability to log breaches, and where necessary to provide you with the notifications to the supervisory authority and to data subjects. Wrap that all up with a readiness assessment, which gives you a full report of all aspects of compliance and highlights areas where you still need to perform activities. So I'm going to do a quick demo. It's 14 minutes and 50 seconds of the service to give you background on it and to give you an understanding of how it's taking a very complex service and breaking it down into its components and giving you the ability to manage in a collaborative manner the full compliance of your organization. So one of the key aspects of the GDPR is that it talks about proportionality. And proportionality is really saying that, if you're a 5-man company, there's a big difference in your compliance compared to a 1,000-person company. So we have built proportionality into this service. We unlock features based on what your needs are. So really it starts off with what is your employee size. And for example, human resources checklists are very different for a 5-person company to a 1,000-person company. So we unlock features as well where you determine the things that you are doing. For example, do you share data with other controllers? Do you transfer data outside of the EU? So these questions determine the functionality that we unlock. The number of employees determines the depth of the functionality that we unlock. So you simply switch something on or off and it will appear in your service or not. So on the dashboard, we've done it really in the order in which you need to do it. Data Protection Officer, compliance areas, governance areas, issues of employees and employee training, subject access request, and breach management. Those are the core areas. Data mapping is where, as you said, we define the who, what, why, and where, and that feeds into your privacy notices in governments, and it feeds the creation of processors and data sharing agreements. So if I go into Data Protection Officer, to determine whether you need a Data Protection Officer formally, you can always designate one voluntarily. We have a mechanism to do that. So our system consists of a questionnaire, and the questions that are asked over there are GDPR questions that determine whether you need a Data Protection Officer or not. So we are a public authority other than a court. We do regular systematic monitoring of data subjects on a large scale. Those are all the questions that determine whether one must have a DPO or not, and you can appoint one voluntarily. We then have introduced the concept of a checklist. Checklist is really an area where we have a statement and you state whether it is started, in progress, not applicable, or completed. And you can add notes against each statement. You can also assign a statement or a task to an external person who can complete that task without actually accessing the service itself and really just deal with that singular task. And everywhere where you see red text, we provide definitions of that text, and where you have a hyperlink as well, we would link through, for example, Article 37, which is the GDPR article. We open to the right point and it shows you everything to do with the Data Protection Officer in the GDPR documents. So that covers the Data Protection Officer setup. We now move to the area of compliance. GDPR states that there are 4 areas of compliance that you need to manage: data subject consent, electronic marketing and profiling, human resources, and information use and security. And this is a dashboard for your compliance. So if we look at HR practices, there are a number of areas where we need to look at these: recruitment, employment, etc. If we look at information use and security, it's use of IT, retention restrictions, security controls, and information quality. And if we go into security controls, we have our statements, we have our statuses, we also have a risk level, and these risks are defined as levels by the GDPR. You can add your own items if you wish and create your own template of compliance. And once again, we have the background and the risk rankings set out. So these are all definitions ex the GDPR itself. So you can see the status of where you are with each one of the areas on the pie graph as required. So now we move to the area of governance, which is really, there's a number of things you need. You need to have a records of processing details, and we have a form that you fill in that enables you to deal with that. You need a number of things on your website: a privacy notice, an employee privacy notice, which may be on your intranet, and subject access queries. We have internal documents that you can use, so we have defaulted those documents, which saves a lot of time. You may edit and alter those as required. So if we look at the privacy notice, we give you a generated privacy notice which has come from your data mapping. And that really says what you do with the data, where do we collect it, if it's from indirect sources, where we get it from, for example, a credit bureau, who our data protection officer is, and who our supervisory authority is. So you can take that document, edit it, or upload your own. And you'd want to upload your own because we host this for you, and you can essentially gives you that piece of code which you can place on your website wherever information is collected, and would mean that you have one privacy notice for your organization. It's very easy for these to go out of sync and you have multiple versions all over the place. In terms of subject access, we give you set the email of the person that will receive subject access requests. We then give you a piece of code to place on your website, probably in the footer, which provides a subject access request link. We then generate the subject access request form on behalf of your company, which they can then fill in, which a subject can then fill in and submit. And then we have a workflow, which I'll show you in a minute, which outlines the processing procedures that are required in terms of fulfilling a subject access request. So that covers your web-facing information. Then we have example documents, for example, employee training. We have a document where you can use the template, use your own content, or upload your own document to give initial training to staff. And we will be adding videos into this section as well for employee training, which we are in the process of putting in place. So that covers the area of governance. Employees and employee training is a critical part of the GDPR. Employees must be aware, who handle information must be aware of GDPR. So we have a checklist for employees. And we have a compliance communication area. So you can download an employee template, import all your employees, and then you can work through sending them documents. And we have a status on each employee and each document saying they have been sent the document, or they have been sent and have read and accepted that document. So you can send it, for example, to all employees, all the documents, set the subject and the message, and send those emails. Each employee will receive the email and they will have to click that I have read and accepted this document. And this is something which you would do probably every 3 to 6 months with your employees, just to make sure that they have all that information. So moving on to subject access requests, these have come through and we have the ability to edit them and respond to subject access requests. We've got a guide as to how to respond to these requests, and it's all the information that's required. You've got the ability to download the form that they filled in and then go through a very simple workflow of received, checked, verified, in progress, rejected, and completed. And you have all the notes on a subject access request, which is a vital element of GDPR compliance, that these are available and accessible should the ICO ever come around and audit your organization. In terms of breach management, a breach is not, everybody stole our credit cards. It's a lot of things constitute a breach. It's improper disposal of equipment, theft of equipment, filing cabinets that are insecure. Those are all constitute breaches, and you need to record the breaches that have occurred in your organization. And we have a 9-step process for recording breaches. First, it's the incident details and title, and then a risk assessment. How many records have been affected by this breach? Is the incident contained or not? If it's not contained, then you have to go through processors to inform the supervisory authority, and we've got the letter that gets generated for that you can download. You potentially need to inform the data subjects that have been affected by this. And then once you've completed the breach, there's incident evaluation and response, and you've recorded your breach. It's got a status of completed or in progress, and you can move forward. So at this point, I'm ready to do the readiness assessment, which could be done at any point in time. And this is really a report showing all of your compliance activities in one go. So that's a filter which allows you to filter the report. But this is the full report, which shows you your interview questions to your needs analysis, the company setup details. It also goes into the data mapping area, data collection, as well as each of the checklists that you filled in, your data protection officer checklist, your employees checklist, as well as employee compliance dashboard, your various 4 compliance items of data subject consent, direct electronic marketing and profiling, the human resources practices and the IT compliance practices, as well as showing you all your processors and data sharing agreement and the status of those agreements. It can also be used as a management tool to manage compliance. So for example, if I just set to look at compliance in progress and not started for HR practices and information use and security, that report is then automatically generated. I can download it as a PDF, take it to my meeting with my HR and IT manager, and actually get those tasks sorted that still need to be completed. So as I said, data mapping feeds governance, and it feeds into your processes and your data sharing area. And it's really the level of granularity that you map your data at does not need to be massively deep, but really it's about who, which is my data subject types, who am I holding personal and sensitive information about. Now we give you a default list, but you can add your own as you need, and you simply tick them. You click next, and it comes through to our area of why am I holding information about my customers and clients, and the why is called the processing purpose. And for each processing purpose, we give you a default list. You can add your own. For each one of these, you need to hold the legal basis as to why you're holding that information, as well as the retention period that you will be holding that information for. Once you've defined all your processing purposes, and for example, sales and distribution of products and services, you need to state what personal data you're holding about that, what sensitive personal data you're holding, and you can add your own of these. And for sensitive personal data, there's a further legal basis that the GDPR requires, because this is obviously information which is obviously very sensitive. Processing and locations are both in-house locations as well as external locations located inside or outside of the EU. And your external locations really defines processors who are processing information on behalf of your organization, and you need to potentially have a contract with them. The data sharing area is any organizations, industry bodies, whatever the case may be, with whom you share information. Could be loyalty schemes or a variety of other entities. At any point in time, you can map your data mapping visualization, which shows you your processing purposes, your personal data type, your sensitive personal data type, all of that information, where the information is located in external locations, and gives you a clear visual on what you're doing. Then we come to processes and data sharing, and essentially we have a checklist for processors, as well as the ability to record and store signed processor contracts. So we have all the details about the processor. We can know from the data mapping which information they potentially are using, and that can go into the processor contract. You can download a template contract and essentially upload a signed contract, which may be your own or maybe the one that we have given you as a basis. Data sharing is pretty much similar to that. If you are managing multiple organizations, it's very easy to switch between them. If you've done it with the same email address, you simply click the switch organization, swap organizations, and you're working with the other one. We have a number of reports available, which you've seen, the data mapping, the readiness assessments, the settings we went through. Users, you can add multiple users and give them specific permissions. So for example, the HR user may only be able to use HR items. And then under support, we have the full GDPR. We've got a GDPR request information sheet. We have all our definitions which highlight the red text in the service. And we also have a full comprehensive help center where we have writings about a number of topics regarding the GDPR, as well as all our help videos, which are also available inside the app context sensitively. You may also submit tickets over here and view tickets as and when you need to. So the help videos, for example, shows you, it's really help videos explaining the application that you can use as and when you need to while you are in the application. You can also submit a support request directly and then essentially sign out. So that covers the details of the service, which really manages full compliance management service. It's not law as a service. You still have to seek the legal advice where there are areas of contention that are very specific to your organization. So thank you for that. That's my name and email address. And really, we'd really like to help you make your organization compliant and to help your clients become compliant through our partner program, which you can sign up for. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ty. That was very interesting, very comprehensive as well, so thank you for your time there. We'll open the floor up now to some of your questions. We've got quite a few come in, some generically around implementation of GDPR and a couple on the product itself. One of the first questions that has come in from Philip is information about non-EU citizens covered by the legislation? I'm happy to take this. No, the GDPR covers EU citizens, but of course the reverse is true. If you're a company outside the EU, operating outside the EU, and yet you process data belonging to EU citizens, then you will need to be compliant. So GDPR does have a global reach for all organizations, but it is within the EU, the scope is there to protect EU citizens' data. There is a question also from Kathy relating to employment records of previous employees. I think the real answer here, Kathy, is around establishing the lawful basis for processing that data. So there could be a whole range of examples relating to information you may keep about employees. And it may well be within your interest to have this. It may be very, very useful information. But do keep in mind that you potentially would need to establish the lawful basis for processing that data. And as a consequence, you may need to demonstrate that sometime in the future. So have a look at the 6 criteria that can be used to establish lawful basis for processing data. These are listed out on the ICO website. Find one that suits your circumstance. And just to keep in mind, there's not always needs to be consent. There are other ways of establishing the lawful basis for processing someone's data. So a couple more questions. Certainly some interesting ones about the product itself. Madeline asks, where does GDPR 365 store its data? It's always an interesting question to understand when we've got so much focus on data protection. Where in the world do you store your data?
Okay, so we store the data in the European Union. Our primary servers are at Amazon in Ireland, and our failover servers are in Frankfurt. It's obviously, with Brexit coming up, this may potentially be a problem in the future, but we undertake that if that would be a problem with Brexit, we would move our UK customers to UK-based servers.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, we're finding that very typically. Many online cloud service providers are establishing their data centers within the UK. We've got data centers from IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, all within the UK now, and many cloud services are using those services. So many organizations, the data that they hold for you, it is stored within the UK or potentially in the EU. It could be Ireland or somewhere similar as well. Another quick question regarding GDPR, basically generically as it were. How do you get clients to understand GDPR? Thanks, William, for that question. My view on this is that GDPR is a very much needed update to the existing Data Protection Act from 1998. Technology has really moved forward over the last 20 years. We've got lots of new technologies, social media, big data, artificial intelligence, lots of ways of processing data that simply didn't exist. So GDPR is trying to address some of those concerns, trying to ensure that companies and organizations process data in an accountable way. So how do you say that to your clients? Well, you're saying you're trying to do the best for them. You're trying to ensure that their data is well protected, it is used appropriately in an accountable manner. And I think it's basically around enhanced consumer rights. And that's very much a good thing for everybody. In terms of a small business or a practice, the point is that if you look after consumer data well, and you can demonstrate that, you should be building client trust. And if you also data protection, for example, the use of encryption or other security measures and whatever, allows you to build business resilience as well. So the two go hand in hand. You've got increased client trust and, to an extent, increased business resilience as well. So I think that's one of the good things about GDPR, and one of the many good things about GDPR is it really does help you build that client trust as well. Some interesting questions here. Let me just give me a moment to try and gather my thoughts. Let me see. Oh, quite a lot of interest in the cost. Ty, where can people go to find out your pricing models?
Basically, if you go to www.gdpr365.com, there's a pricing tab. We price it based on the number of employees in a company. So it starts off at 5 and less. Then we have brand from 6 to 15. 16 to 250 and 250 above. If you're a large organization with more than 250 employees, there's often potentially subsidiaries and things, and then we would provide a quotation for that. But the pricing is on the website at www.gdpr365.com.
A similar sort of related question is from Maxine. How does the partner program work? I wonder if you give us an overview, a little bit more explanation about that, Ty.
Right, so there are two versions of the partner program. One is really where you refer clients and they go off and register. So you'd register with us as a partner. We've given the link for that in the resources page. You would register as a partner with us, and then you get a URL. You refer that to your customers. They register with that URL, and they would manage their own compliance, and off they would go, and you would get a rebate on their annual subscription or their monthly subscription. The other is if you wish to bundle GDPR services around our offering, you would build your pricing around the consultation, the reviews, and all of those aspects of the GDPR compliance for your client, and then we would potentially invoice you for your clients, and you would build your margin for the consulting on top of that and invoice your client an amount either on a monthly or an annual basis to keep them up to date and to keep them compliant with GDPR. So those are the two models that we work with. And you're welcome to contact us afterwards to find out in more detail how we work with the rebates and how you get paid and how it works for a partnership agreement.
Michael is asking, at the beginning we heard a legal health warning. What are GDPR 365 declining responsibility for? I don't think there's anything hidden here, but interesting to hear. Ty, are you able to answer that question for us?
Yes. Thank you, Michael, for putting me on the spot there. That's a nice question. Really, we're not declining responsibility for anything, but we're not taking on the responsibility to make organizations GDPR compliant. So we provide a compliance management service that enables organizations to make themselves compliant. But the point is that we can't offer legal advice. We can offer a service. We've interpreted with experts the Act and created a system out of it. And also, a company could simply go through and check all their compliance items and say we've done everything, and we've got to take that on faith. So first of all, we are unable to give a certificate saying you are compliant. It's a kind of a best efforts thing that you would have to do. But the point is that we can't give legal advice. We can give you a management services through which you can manage your compliance as an organization. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think compliance is an interesting point. There is no point in time where any organization is compliant. There isn't just a simple tick box that says, I've done X, Y, and Z, I am compliant, that's it. The law simply doesn't work like that. If there ever was an issue and there was a complaint raised followed by an ICO investigation, it is the ICO's job to perform a comprehensive review of the situation. determine areas of maybe problems occurred or something like that, and make a judgment after the fact. So very challenging to say I am compliant. There just simply is never a state. And of course it is an ongoing journey as well. Ty, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah. Yes, I think there's also the issue, certain organizations, certain types of organizations have got very, very specific requirements. So you can't always address every single issue that an organization faces inside a system. We're providing a generic solution for GDPR compliance management. There may be aspects within an organization that are so subtle that they need to consult legal advice, whether they use the system or not. In addition, what we also have is we have a schools version that we've released, so there's very specific things regarding schools, and we are going to be releasing a medical practice version for private medical practices because they are so very specific and they handle such sensitive information.
Okay, thank you. A question from Claire. Do you offer on-site training for users as part of the package?
We don't really offer on-site training. We work with them, with the users. The system should be easy enough in terms of managing that compliance. We are putting on a full GDPR training video course with answers and questions and answers and a certification at the end of it onto our service. And we also have an employee GDPR awareness video coming into the service as well. But we don't typically go to the sites. We do have consultants that work with us that may be able to go to the site. They are partners that have signed up with us to resell our services, and we can potentially recommend them to go out to specific client sites. It really is a service in the cloud, and we will offer all the support and help we can via telephone and support services.
Thank you. The GDPR 365 website refers to pricing for seats and processors. What is the distinction between the two? Again, that was a question from Maxine.
Okay, so seats is really, it's really defined on the number of employees that you have. Seats is we give you 2 user accounts at the entry level, so you can define 2 users of the service. And the number of processors is really the number of outsourced companies that you would have defined in the service. And if you have, there are some organizations that may have 5 employees but be multi-billion companies that have got processors all over the place. They would need to upgrade to the level where they manage those quantities of items.
Another interesting question. Continuous compliance is difficult to define. How do you, Mark, expect clients to review compliance? It's challenging. I can't directly answer that. Some of this will obviously be defined by how the ICO approaches the implementation of GDPR in the UK through the Data Protection Bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment. But I think one aspect that's worthwhile thinking about is reviewing consent. So if you're dealing with clients and you have written consent from them, the guidance that we believe is appropriate at the moment is to review that consent every 2 years. So go back to your clients every 2 years and say to them, are you happy for us to continue processing in such a way? The Institute, for example, is very lucky. The renewal cycle of people's memberships allow us to go back to the members every year, and we will continue to do that in the future to ask their acceptance of how we process data for them as well. So that's an aspect of that, of continuous assessment, I feel. So interesting questions. I just need to find 1 or 2 that I think we can answer. Okay. Apologies for just a moment. It's difficult to read and consolidate some of these questions at the same time.
Shall I just talk about continuous compliance for a minute?
Yes, of course, Ty. Thank you.
I think one needs to constantly review GDPR compliance. I would say every 3 to 6 months. I mean, things change in your organizations. New servers are put into are installed. People change, as I discussed in the slideshow. New employees come on board. You may change the way you're processing things. So there's a need as part of the management team of an organization to, at management meetings, question and ask what has changed in terms of our GDPR compliance, or what has changed that could affect our GDPR compliance, and how do we address these changes. So it is an ongoing management meeting agenda item that needs to be present.
Thank you. An interesting question, which should be a very useful point I think we need to take away. Will you offer online data protection awareness training? Currently, we, the Institute, have no plans to offer such thing, but it is an important topic, I think, around understanding employees, understanding the role of data protection and obviously cybersecurity as well. So we'll take that point away and consider it. So thank you for asking that question as well. There's another question. Is it possible for smaller practices, say 10 employees or something like that, to use a more manual system? My advice here would be to hunt out some of the templates that the ICO have provided, which are on their website under the documentation section for GDPR. And these templates provide a starting point for trying to gather your thoughts about how you use data, what you collect, who you share it with, and so on, and the lawful basis for processing. So that can work for smaller organizations. But I think the point is that a lot of these tools that are being created, GDPR 365 is an example of one, they are comprehensively written to work for organizations of almost any size, and they can do that for smaller organizations as well as larger ones, and they've been very carefully considered to really prompt you for answering all possible questions. And of course it also has functionality like the subject access request functionality as well. So there's more to it than just simply using a template. Ty, do you think there's more to it than that?
Well, I think there's, even if you're a small company, there are still aspects of collaboration that you need to take into account. So really the areas where you need to have things are obviously your privacy notices. If you've got a website and you're collecting information from anybody, you need to have those in place. You need to have your subject access requests. You need to record your breaches. And if that's sitting in somebody's drawer or on their laptop on a spreadsheet, which potentially isn't being backed up, there's lots of issues with security of that information, and you need to decide, like you've decided to use an accounting system to record your financial transactions, to use a system to record your compliance, which produces a relatively comprehensive report covering your compliance areas and is at that small level not necessarily that expensive if you take into account the risks that you are covering.
Okay, thank you. The question from Claire. As an accounting practice, does this cover all aspects of the business, i.e. tax, audit, and accounts, etc.? So does the tool provide a way of covering all aspects that are typically serviced by an accounting practice?
Well, I think you need to look at what the GDPR is about. The GDPR is about managing personal and sensitive organization that an information keeps. So really, it's not worried about the processes that you use in your business. It's worrying about the security, confidentiality, integrity, and timelessness of the information that you have that is of a personal nature and of a sensitive personal nature. So you would map the processes. You'd only map in data mapping the processes where personal and sensitive information are stored. You don't need to map every single process in your organization. So it doesn't really matter what you do. It matters what you do with that specific type of information, and you need to have a system that manages that specific type of information and has all of the compliance items regarding that specific kind of information in place.
One more question for myself from Sally. Is ICAW going to update the standard engagement letters? If so, when? We are reviewing those. They are going through the final stages of review now, and they should be available in early March, we believe. We're also considering providing an example privacy statement as well. So we'll see what happens, but certainly the engagement letters should be available in the next couple of weeks. And keep in mind that they won't necessarily be applicable to use until May. So I'm just going through some questions. From Claire, what is a third-party data transfer register? Ty, can you take that one for me?
A third-party data transfer register is essentially a list of the companies to whom you transfer data to. So that could be processors, or it could be data sharing entities that you share information with. So third party being entities outside of your organization with whom you share information.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks everybody for your questions today. It's been very interesting. There's all sorts of questions around how GDPR is going to be implemented and also with regards to the product itself. So thank you very much for that today. Thank you, Ty, for giving us that. We have this webinar is just one of a series. We have others which are available on demand. The details of those are shown on screen at the moment. Please do feel to log in and access those. They do ask you to book, so you effectively book for a previously shown webinar, and once you do that, you're taken through to an actual recording of the webinar. So whilst it looks like a booking process, it's just a way of actually accessing that already existing recording. So that concludes today's webinar. I'd like to thank Ty for his presentation. I'd also like to thank you, our listeners, for your time and your questions today. Hopefully you found all these things useful. The webinar has been recorded, and we will send you a link to the on-demand recording over the next couple of days. Finally, a short feedback survey will be shown to you at the end of this webinar. Please do take a moment or two to complete that, and we will see you at future webinars. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.